Thank you very much. By way of introduction, since we're talking about education, I would cite one of the smartest popes in history. Popes don't have to be brilliant. Once you get the job, that's it. But Pope Sylvester was Pope at the time of the first millennium. He had to calm the Romans down, telling them not to be superstitious. The year 1000, the world was not going to come to an end. This Pope was a naturalist. He helped develop what we now know as chemistry. He introduced Arabic numerals to Europe, which transformed science and economics. He was a pioneer in hydraulics. He developed a mechanical clock, and he also invented the prototype of the modern pipe organ. That was in his spare time. He had been Bishop of Reims. Then he moved from Gaul to Italy, where he was Bishop of Ravenna, and then from there he became Bishop of Rome. The more superstitious people, when they examined his brilliance, attributed it to diabolism. And their proof was that he had been bishop of the 3 dioceses, each one began with the letter R. It is thought that that maybe where we get the 3 R's, not reading, writing, arithmetic, but Reims, Ravenna, and Rome. He knew that the church is the repository of universal knowledge, not just facts, but how knowledge unites facts. The very ground of culture. Culture comes from cult, how we worship. And culture decays when we do not worship, or when we worship the wrong things. I belong to an old club in New York from the Civil War, and one of the members is a classical old walrus type that hangs around in retirement in the club. He's a retired Army officer from West Point. He said to me one day, he said, you know, you're a Catholic, I'm a Presbyterian, I'm a Freemason, but I have to hand it to you guys on one thing. You guys gave us civilization. I thought that was at least one point on my favorite. Veritas vos liberavi, this was a motto of Pope Sylvester. The truth will set you free. This is where we get the liberal arts, freeing us from ignorance. Facts do not free us from ignorance. It is the vision of God that frees us from ignorance, because we can have a lot of facts and not know what to do with them. We can do very bad things with facts. This vision, of course, in the Middle Ages was consolidated and summed up in the trivium and the quadrivium. The trivium, grammar, rhetoric, and logic. Grammar, basically knowing how to decipher words. Rhetoric, knowing how to put them together. And logic, knowing how to make sense of them. When this breaks down, and it has broken down in our breaking down culture, what happens? We lose logic because we are not able to express truth, and we are not able to express truth because we're not able to read the grammar of this civilization. There was a preacher once who left his manuscript in the pulpit, and someone picked it up, and in the margin he had put weak point, shout. Dictators throughout history have done that. There are riots in the cities right now in our country, one right outside my parish. People have weak points about politics. What did they do? They shout. After the trivium, one moves into the quadrivium, where you get arithmetic, geometry, music, and astronomy. And you see what's going on here. This is an analysis of the order of creation. Arithmetic lets us analyze the numbers behind things. It's no coincidence that the rabbis say that creation was ordered in 7 days, really 7 acts before there were days. And that is replicated all through, even the natural order. 7 basic crystals in chemistry, 7 major notes on the Western musical scale, light refracts into 7 colors. There are 7 bones in the neck, I'm told, and 7 bones in the ankle if you want to x-ray. But we also, in the moral order, have 7 virtues, and we have 7 deadly sins. 7 sacraments are given to us by God, and when our Lord reconstructs the order of the world on the cross, he speaks 7 times. All of this then roots us in an understanding of history. The pattern of human experience follows an order. And if we know our history, then we're able to predict human behavior. The old saying is, not to know history is to be condemned to repeat it. And I would suggest a great gift of the Catholic vision is the meaning of history. And we have lost our sense of history. History has become a lacuna. It was replaced a couple generations ago with what's called social science. Not history at all. Cicero was not a Christian by any means. He had heard rumors of something called the followers of Christus. But one of his famous lines about education, Nesciri autem quid antiquam natusis accidere, id est semper esse puerum. Not to know what happened before you lived is to always be a child. Our Lord says we have to be like children to enter the kingdom of heaven. That's being childlike, innocent, open to knowledge, standing in awe of truth. But that is not being childish. But Cicero is saying if we don't know our past, we'll be childish in how to behave in the present and how to prepare for the future. The ignorance of history can be repaired. I once said to an altar boy, it was on the feast of St. Onesimus, who's Onesimus? I said, I'm surprised you didn't know that. He said, you must think I'm stupid. I said, no, you're not stupid. You're just ignorant. He did not appreciate the scholastic difference. You know what being stupid is, but to be ignorant is not to know something. Will Rogers said everybody is ignorant about something. I'm ignorant about a lot of things, computers and so on. I haven't driven a car in 15 years. I'm ignorant about driving laws and so on. But that can be repaired. But if that is not repaired, what happens? We live in a kind of incubus, a kind of an isolated bubble, separating ourselves from all of the human experience. The inarticulateness of a generation now is evidence of precisely that kind of ignorance. We've all had experience. We've read those funny answers on school examinations. I have a few of them here. A religious examination in high school. An epistle is the wife of an apostle. Homer was not written by Homer, but by another man of that name. Socrates died from an overdose of wedlock. Milton wrote Paradise Lost, and when his wife died, he wrote Paradise Regained. The greatest writer of the Renaissance was William Shakespeare. He was born in the year 1564, supposedly on his birthday. So much for grammar, rhetoric, and logic. But when we are no longer grammatical, rhetorical, and logical, when we do not see the pattern of life in an ordered harmony, we will not understand why the Bible begins with history. Genesis, Boreh Bereshit, in the beginning. And then the fourth gospel, NRK, in the beginning. There was the beginning. There was a beginning, of course, there was a beginner. And by so declaring, then God tells us that we are now stewards, not only of his material creation, but of the moral progress of the human race, which is in his image. Abandon that, and we will always be children. Always children. In the last few days, there has been a sort of chaotic reaction to the elections on many university campuses. University of Pennsylvania, for instance, Stanford, I'm sure many, many others. And they've all followed the same pattern. I think the faculties must consult with each other because they created safe spaces. And I'm not making this up. I know this is true at Princeton. I know it started at the University of Pennsylvania. Safe spaces where the university students could go and sit on pillows. They'd be given tissues when they wept, a hot chocolate with marshmallows, kittens and puppies to stroke, and coloring books. You will always be a child if you do not know what has happened before. And yet, you know, the average age of a soldier in the American Revolution was 17. The average age of a general in the Civil War, let's say, in the Civil War there were 15 generals, 8 in the Union Army and 7 in the Confederate Army under the age of 25. Alexander Hamilton became a lieutenant colonel at the age of 21. At the Battle of Lepanto, which really saved civilization, we would not be here without that victory. The Holy Roman Emperor, Charles, and the Chief Admiral, Don Juan of Austria, were 24 years old. None of them, in the trauma of war, retreated to a safe space to stroke kittens and play with coloring books. Philip Farnsworth gave us the prototype of the television in the United States at the age of 21. Blaise Pascal invented the calculator, the prototype of the modern computer, at the age of 12. Louis Braille invented the Braille system at the age of 15. And he was blind himself. None of them sought shelter in times of difficulty in a safe space. The classical authors speak of the golden mean, and we can get that wrong if we think it means just moderation. The golden mean was like a laser beam between extremes. And the life of moderation they spoke of is not what we popularly mean by moderation. The classical golden mean, which Christ then perfects in holiness, is the choice of the good over the convenient and commitment to the true instead of the plausible. Liberal education is tutelage in that golden path. And any civilization so wrapped up in itself that it settles for the lowest common denominator quickly bottoms out and rarely rises again. Virtue, then, is the desire to observe the golden mean. Courage is the mean between cowardice and bravado. Magnificence, the mean between vulgarity and miserliness. Noble pride, the mean between vanity and servility. In the 18th century, Bishop Berkeley called religion the mean between superstition and incredulity. Even in The ancient cynics who denied transcendent truth believed that happiness might be attained through the life of the virtues. In its extreme debased form, that led to Stoicism. Modern cynicism has rejected the virtues, and this has led not to Stoicism, but to hedonism. In 1967, the Land O'Lakes Conference, which helped destroy Catholic education in our country, manifested its cynicism by rejecting what it called ecclesiastical juridical control, censorship, or supervision. And this has infected Catholic education at all levels, so that political correctness has superseded religion itself. And political correctness, I would say, is conformity to popular prejudice rather than truth. And this is a repetition of the cynicism of the Emperor Justinian, the apostate, who rejected the faith of the church, even though he had gone to the very same schools and was a classmate with Basil the Great and Gregory Nazianzen. So it is possible for the same education to produce a saint and an apostate. And the apostate in his cynicism can be more censorious of free thought and free speech. G.K. Chesterton said, "The more doubtful we are about whether we have any truth, the more certain we are apparently that we can teach it to children. And the smaller our faith in doctrine, the larger our faith in doctors." A friend of mine, a college friend of mine, Peter Robinson, was a speechwriter for President Reagan. He wrote, "Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall." So he was told not to put that in the speech. Reagan says it stays in. Peter's youngest child went to kindergarten for the first day and came back and announced she did not like it and was not going back. He asked me to speak sense to her. And I said she was right and he was wrong. That kindergarten really is a waste of time because it only leads to first grade. And first grade only leads to second grade, and it's an endless treadmill. The problem with school is that you're dealing with your peers. And that's no way to really learn higher truth. What you should do is spend your time, first of all, talking to very old people, because they're not going to be around when you're grown up, and they have a lot to teach. And then I said also, I'm speaking as a New Yorker now, instead of wasting time in school, you should have your little girl hang around hotel lobbies. She'll meet a lot of people. If she talks to the man who sells newspapers on the corner, she'll learn how to speak Hindi. If she goes into a nice cocktail lounge, she'll learn how to play the piano, and so on. Go to a garage, and you'll learn something practical about machinery. Go into the kitchen of a restaurant, and you'll learn how to cook and order things. He printed this up, and it went viral. It was reprinted in a couple homeschooling magazines. They took me absolutely seriously. And I was browbeaten by a woman who wrote to me saying it was disgusting that a clergyman should tell children to loiter in hotel lobbies. However, the Catholic Church puts us in the classroom, but it takes us out of the classroom as well, and shows us something much larger than what is just written on the blackboard, if they still have blackboards. Let me just end by citing another great mind, Herman Contractus. He's a blessed now on the calendar, in the Middle Ages. His parents, who already had a great many children, were despairing. He was born, they didn't have the term then, with spina bifida. They expected he would die very soon. And so they took him to the Benedictine monastery nearby. The monks took him in to care for him that he would have a holy death. Well, he didn't die that year. He didn't die the next year. He lived actually into his 30s. He had to be carried around. But in that time, He learned a half a dozen languages, including Arabic, which he used to translate Aristotle from the Arabic back into Latin. He developed a form of plow which transformed agriculture in Europe and saved populations from starvation. He invented the astrolabe, which was used to discover the New World. He also gave us a form of accounting which transformed economics, capitalism, helped develop capitalism in Europe. And he was also a composer. He gave us an updated form of musical annotation, and he composed hymns we still sing today. And the most famous is the Salve Regina. It is only when we understand the background of that hymn by Herman Contractus, Herman the Paralyzed, that we understand what he's saying. Salve Regina, Mater Misericordiae, vita dulcedo in spes nostra salve. Ad te clamamus, exoles filii Evae. Ad te suspiramus, gementes afflentes, in hac lacrimarum vale. Hail, Holy Queen, Mother of Mercy, Mother of Life, our sweetness and our hope. To thee do we cry, poor banished children of Eve. To thee do we send up our sighs, mourning and weeping, in this valley of tears. He wrote that, lying on a stretcher, a young man. But the Benedictines had taken him in because they knew the sanctity of life. And we see the rewards that issued from that vision. And that is the vision of the church that transforms education from mere facts to an intuition of salvation. Thank you.